Hey there, everybody. Matt Busby again. We are continuing our track reference guide. Some visual references, some notes on how I'm getting around the racetrack, car positioning, stuff like that. Last week we went from the front straight or the start-finish line to turn 6. You can find those videos either on our Facebook page or on our YouTube. So you can go back and reference those. We're going to jump right into it. We're starting back here in turn 6. I had a question yesterday from Greg Bell, which is something that we want to talk about. If you kind of look over here on our track map, if you kind of have a track map to reference or something like that, we like to treat turn 6 and turn 7 like one big constant radius corner. There are some input changes that you make with your hands, but don't think of it as two separate corners. Think of it as kind of one big section, and that'll kind of help you smooth out your transition from kind of the big braking event of turn 6 into the really deceptively fast rhythm section of turn 7 and turn 8. So here we are at turn 6. We're kind of backwards a little bit. I wanted to pick up from the apex at turn 6. So we hit our apex and we are working our way all the way out to driver's left. You can kind of see that my hands, I still have just a little bit of wheel in the car. I'm gonna straighten up my hands just a little bit. Just because we kind of went out really wide, but we're trying to maximize our speed through the sector. But the input for turn 7 is going to be really small, to the point where in certain cars, it should become one big arc, like one big input. In some, you may straighten your hands a little bit, but your turn in for turn 7 is actually not all that big. And the reason that is, we talked a little bit about it before. Right now, we are starting to head downhill and off camber, which is usually it's the worst case scenario terrain-wise for front end grip. Whereas up here, you can see the racetrack. You can see the kind of the tire marks of where the racetrack is. That's because at the apex or at the bottom of that hill, at the apex of 7, the track transitions to going uphill and on camber, which is generally the best possible scenario for grip. So you can do some things to manipulate the car through turn 7. That means, when I say manipulate the car, that means you're going to steer the car with something other than your hands. You're not going to make a really, your steering input is not just with your hands. In some cars, like in some of the Miatas that we've raced around here, turn 7 is pretty usually, depending on grip level and everything, turn 7 is usually flat. But in a car like this, in my Corvette, or in a heavier car that might have a little bit more trouble transitioning making big weight transitions, what you'll actually do is you're going to be full throttle right here on the racetrack where we're at, but you're just going to do an abrupt lift. And what that's going to do is, if you time that, when you just have just a hair of wheel into the car, as you time your lift, it's going to throw a whole bunch of weight to the front of the car, and it's going to make the car lunge to the direction that you have the steering wheel pointed. So you're actually using that throttle off oversteer, or that throttle off weight transition, to help the car point to the apex. Because remember, once we get down to apex at turn 7, the racetrack's there to catch us. Like, it's just gonna, you can usually overcook the hell out of it, and the racetrack's there to catch us. So so we're staying really, really far out to the left. Like I said, my hands still have just a hair of input. I'm not taking all of my hands out of the car, right? So this is one big arc. And you could see I kind of had a little poke of input, and that was timed with the lift of a throttle, or a throttle input, to help the car point to where I want it to be. And we're going to kind of break it down once we get down here, and I'll go back and play it in time. And so you see my hands aren't doing much outside of balancing the car. There are some little twitches here and there, just the car trying to move around. So We'll go back to turn 6. And you saw that hand movement with that throttle adjustment helped the car point to where I wanted it to be without sacrificing a huge amount of speed. It's not a lift and then turn in waiting for the front end to catch up. It's a turn in and a lift simultaneously. The timing of it is very, very important. No brakes required. The more confident that you get, you can do it with more and more throttle, so it's not a complete lift. It's a 30% or a 50% lift, but just enough to transition the weight on the front of the car to help it point to where you want it to be. So you see here, it puts us out mid-track. What we are not going to do is we are not going to steer to the right side of the racetrack. We're not gonna try to make a huge weight transition to the right and then to the left. What we are going to do is keep the car here mid-track and make our transition to the left from here. You're wasting linear space, you're wasting efficiency by steering too much. Opening your entry to turn 8 doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to find more apex speed. What we are finding is most people apex 8 way late. And so if you're apexing turn 8 really late, yeah, it feels like you have to open your hands up and open your entry up on your car positioning. But the entry to turn 8 is actually really early. And we'll kind of show you here what that means for you on your exit and where we're doing that. So here I am. This is where I'm apexing, right about the start of the curbing. I've gotten the car down to where I want. You could hear the car kind of fight me to it, but we don't see any blue paint. Like we kind of talked about in our first video, the blue paint is not there as the best way through the corner. The blue paint is there as the safest way through the corner. So as you're trying to find more speed, you're going to have to take more risks. And the risks we are going to take here, specifically at turn 8, as you can see at the horizon of the racetrack here, the racetrack has kind of a hill to it, right? And we're going to crest that hill on our exit on throttle. What that means is on our exit, there's a really high probability that if we have too much throttle in the car, we're going to spin the tires. We're going to get a little, we're going to upset the rear of the car. So that means that our throttle application has to be very precise. Our throttle application has to be very progressive. And again, we have to time it exactly right with our hands. This is also going to take us all the way out to the rumble strips, driver's right. You could see I had a big wiggle there on the entry. Car wasn't happy. I asked for a lot of throttle and a lot of steering at once, and you know, a lot of throttle, a lot of steering, you know, generally has a predictable result. But how many people are getting all the way out here this early? If you're not at the rumble strips or just barely kissing the rumble strips this early, in the exit of 8 or into the transition to turn 9, you're holding your hands way too late in through the middle of the corner of 8, or you're setting up really hard on the entry to 8. This is something that we find a lot of people doing, and it actually costs people a tremendous amount of time. The earlier you can get on throttle on the entry to 8, obviously the more you can carry all the way down to 10. So from the apex of 8 all the way down to the braking event to 10 is, again, just like our 1B to 2. It's a little mini straight. It's a lot of on throttle, full throttle time. It's triple digit speeds in this car. Even in our little champ car Miata, it's pretty close to triple digit speeds, 93, 94 miles an hour. So we don't want to sacrifice 50, 100 linear feet of asphalt worth of full throttle time that we could have to have an unnecessarily late apex through 8. Again, you're risking something. You saw the big wiggle that I had in this on this lap. That's something that you're going to have to be comfortable with. And if it goes wrong, you know, you've got, you know, hard things here and hard things here. So if it goes wrong, your margin for error is very low. So that's something that you have to weigh. But if you're going to get faster, you are going to have to take more risk. So our transition to turn 9, there's no rocket science here. Full throttle and steer the car. All right, that's going to put us here mid-track, right? So we're not going to be all the way driver's left. We don't want to be all the way driver's right. We're mid-track, probably, you know, kind of, you know, favored driver's right to open our hands here a little bit. We can see our corner station over here. We can see our brake markers over here. But turn 10 is a really, really interesting situation. It's a decreasing radius corner. It gets really, really, really tight all of a sudden at the apex of the corner. But that's led up to a very big braking event. And in a car like this, that's generally, you know, considering what most track cars, this is a pretty heavy car. Street cars are even heavier. You know, this car weighs about 3,400, 3,450 with me in it. You know, we're carrying 97 here. We're probably going to get up to 101, 102 if I had to guess. And so one of the big things that we get asked about is, where do I want to be under braking for turn 10? And this depends a little bit. There's a few different ways to do it. The less speed you are scrubbing, the further driver's right you can be. You know, just naturally, the more, you know, a lot like having a lot of wheel and a lot of throttle in the car is going to yield bad results. Having a lot of wheel and a lot of brake in the car at the same time is going to yield a bad result. So we want to try and keep our hands as straight as possible with this large deceleration event that we're going to be asking of the car. So with that, we kind of what we call diamond the corner off. So you're going to see my entry and my approach to this feels a little awkward. The car positioning is weird. But if we were approaching our braking from any further right, driver's right, I'm going to have to put a lot more wheel into the car under braking. And this particular car, the C5s, are not known for their ABS efficiency. So we don't want to put it into ABS. We don't want to trigger the car. We don't want to trigger a big, massive understeer. So we want to keep the car pointed as straight as possible under heavy braking as long as possible. So we stayed mid-track and started transitioning over driver's left. You can see again, like last week, this car really on the stock brakes before we upgraded to our AP setup. This car really doesn't want to slow down. You can kind of see the car lunging left and right. We had to account for that, right? So a lot of cars, the faster you're going, the more runway and the more straight you want your hands under these large decel events. So I'm all the way over there, driver's left, to that entry curbing. And you can see I'm kind of setting up, not necessarily for a big arcing corner, right? So if I was in a Miata, I could be a little bit further driver's right to open it up and do a little bit more of a momentum approach to this corner, because I'm not scrubbing 30, 45 miles an hour off of the car. So you know, again, we're just managing the grip that we have and managing what car we're driving, so it's a little different for everybody. But generally, most people are sacrificing way too much by either not staying full throttle into the braking zone of 10. We see that a lot in our coaching and in our data. Or they're entering turn 10 with, instead of a peaky brake trace, you can see kind of here, or no, you can't. You know, you want all of your brake traces to be real peaky on your entry, where we see these long, lazy brake inputs. So you're using the brakes, and you're using the brakes with a lot of wheel, but you're not putting a lot of brake pressure in. So it's going to take, naturally, more braking distance for the deceleration to happen. So I'm not a big fan of that. I like to the first 100 feet, get most of the work done, and then modulate after that. So here we are. We're setting up to go all the way out to these rumble strips. You can kind of see here, we'll get a little closer. We've got our rumble strips here. We don't count the very end white. So 1 red, 1 white, 2 red, 2 white. This second white patch, this second full white patch of curbing is kind of where I'm gonna pirouette the car. Turn 10 is a perfect trail braking corner. If you want to practice trail braking, you know, you want to get better at it, just hit turn 10 over and over and over and over and over again, because we're going to brake all the way down to our point, and then we're going to have an abrupt brake off and steering input at the same time to rotate the car, to kind of try and have a little mini slide to help point the car to the apex, which is around here, but it happens all of a sudden. The corner is really difficult to judge visually, so you kind of have to know where you're going, and you kind of have to have a plan for what you're going to do. You can't figure it out mid-corner. So we're going to let the car go all the way out to that rumble strip, and you're going to see my hands and kind of my feet make a big transition here in the video. And you see that big kind of lurch that the car does towards the curbing. That's part of the rotation. We're just trying to rotate the car to help, because just the steering input is not enough to get through turn 10 quickly. We're holding 41 miles an hour, which is pretty quick here in a heavy street tired car. We're probably going to decelerate down to probably 39, I would bet, mid-corner. No, we held at 40 miles an hour, but a really late apex. This is one of those places where the blue paint does not lie to you. However, the blue paint is pretty much invisible until it's too late. You can't see it until you're there already, and if you're looking for it, your eyes are way too low. Talk about load just a little bit. Again, we're on a street tire car, again, a heavy car. We're under a tremendous amount of load here, and that's through the entire duration of the corner. It's one of the trickiest corners here on the racetrack, and it's one of the biggest areas for improvement for most intermediate drivers, is really committing to a lot of load, really committing to an aggressive trail brake, and then committing here hard to a lot of throttle off the middle of the corner. I think I was a little bit more precise with my throttle input. I might have a little throttle on oversteer here on the exit of the corner, which is okay, but obviously not ideal. Yeah, just a little bit. And then that takes us to the 11 and 12 area. So far, turn 12 has caught the most people out here at NCM. It's the highest incident area we have on the racetrack. And that's for a few reasons. What we're going to focus in on right now is car positioning, right? So we have that this rumble strip out here, driver's left. That's part of the racetrack, folks. Use it. Get all up on that, because that opens your hands up for turn 12. It makes an already quick entry and quick mid corner a little bit easier, just because you've bought yourself some real estate really early on. Don't get over here mid corner and then try to transition really fast. You don't want to go from having left wheel in the car to right wheel in the car all of a sudden. You kind of want to have your hands straight, so you're just asking for one weight transition. So just keep that in mind. We're going to try and get our hands as straight as possible here. Hands are straight before we're entering into the corner. And then for me in this car, it's a little different for everybody. Most Miatas, momentum cars, my BRZ, all that kind of stuff, turn 12's flat. It's very fast. In this car, it's a little bit of a lift, and it's a little bit of a timed lift, maybe even a timed touch of the brakes, not to scrub speed, but again, we're manipulating the car to help our hands. So it'll either be a lift or a brake timed with my steering input to help the car point. So, again, the blue paint here is a little bit safe. You don't want to get on this curb. This curb is extremely aggressive in relation to the grade of the racetrack. So if you get too much curbing, it will throw the car in the air. There's a great picture from Time Trial Nationals of a Civic I don't know how he didn't flip that car. But you can do a lot of harm there, and the more you upset the car on the curb, the more you have to collect it on the exit. So we want to stay off that curb, or take very little amount of that curb. But our blue paint is pretty late into this corner. Again, if you are looking for the blue paint here, your eyes are extremely low, and you need to kind of assess how you're getting visually through a corner. Your eyes should actually be always pointing as to where you want the car to go, not where the car is. Generally, this transition between red and white, that's the actual, a little bit more of an aggressive apex. The blue paint, again, is being the safe area. We take just a hair of curb here, and our eyes are up. Our eyes are looking down here because that's where we want this car to be, not over here, not over here. We want this car over here. The rumble strips here in the middle of the racetrack, it's something that we see a lot of. If you feel that the car is going to understeer out toward those rumble strips, do not try to steer around them. Straighten your hands, commit to going over them, collect the car, and get back on the racetrack. 9 times out of 10, the incidents that we have here are people seeing the rumble strips and adding more wheel rate, a higher wheel rate or more wheel, and end up upsetting the vehicle. They end up upsetting the rear of the car and usually pointing into this wall right here. So if you see that you're gonna commit, like if you're arcing toward those rumble strips, just straighten your hands, man. Just drive over them. You're gonna be fine, I promise. There's a ton of grass and a ton of runoff over here that you can just, ride off into the sunset if it gets particularly bad. But just straighten your hands, collect the car, and get back on when it's safe. So we're gonna take it all the way out to the rumble strips. And what we're not gonna do, you can see I'm holding my hands a little bit later because I wanna put the car mid-track, but I am not going to steer out here. I don't wanna be out here. Right now, visually, all we're seeing is Mars right now. We're not seeing any racetrack. We don't see where the racetrack goes. We see a little bit of wall and that's it. And visually to take in, that's kind of a sketchy input. So what we want to do is trust that the racetrack is there for us. It opens up like the yellow brick road. Again, visually, we don't know what's on the other side of this. There's nothing there. We just have to know where we're going. The racetrack, like I said, opens up tremendously. This is a full throttle corner in pretty much everything I've ever driven. Work up to it. Again, more speed takes more risk. Your blue paint here is close-ish. There's only one real apex here. It's not a particularly technical corner. It just takes commitment. Commitment in your feet and commitment to opening your hands. You want to be opening your hands here. You don't want to be adding wheel rate or having a constant wheel rate through the middle of this corner because you're full throttle, right? You're full throttle and we're traveling pretty damn fast. So if something goes bad, it's going to go fast, or it's going to go bad pretty quickly. On the exit, we're going to take it all the way out to the rumble strip. Which brings us to tabletop. Tabletop, again, is flat in pretty much everything. There's some really, really scary high horsepower cars that I think probably have to live for it. But just generally, again, our visual reference is pretty bad. We don't see where the racetrack is on the other end. It's a blind entry. We just want to get through 14A, 14B over tabletop with as little wheel as possible. We don't want to turn the car all at once when we get up here. We just want to start arcing the car to try and make as straight a line as possible through here.
Really quick, Matt Coleman said, very scary part of the track for me. I'm too used to driving back roads. Blind hills scare me.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes laps. Just anything. Majority of the folks that are really, really good at doing this kind of stuff, they're good at it because they do it a lot. Same with playing music or anything like that. So just get laps, getting comfortable with the racetrack, getting your visual references, just having a good instinctual feel for where you are on this racetrack makes a huge difference. It's really similar to a place like Barber, where there's a lot of blind stuff going on, and so you just have to have an instinctual comfort as to where you are and where you're going to be in the car. So we're going over tabletop. Nothing groundbreaking there, pun intended. It's going to jolt the car just a little bit. Do not lift. Just keep the weight on the rear of the car. Keep your hands as straight as possible. And then we're going to start setting up for 15.
Grant Ellis said really quick, and don't be side loaded when you hit the dip.
Yeah, you don't want to be side loaded too much. I mean, if that dip is upsetting the car when you're under full throttle and you have that much wheel in the car, then you've got something going on, like the car's set up way too soft or something like that, or vice versa, way too stiff where it's hopping the car. generally, there's a little bit of a bump there, but it's not a problem for anything. If you are feeling some sort of like oversteer or anything like that, your wheel rate is way too high. You're asking for way too much steering angle too early or too late. Like, try to arc it in as gradually as possible with as little wheel as possible. So for 15, we're getting all the way over to driver's right. The rumble strips again here are part of the racetrack. We want to use all of them. So you can hear me, I kind of had a little bit of a lift there. You can, if you've got a lot of aero, you can kind of be flat up this area. But just generally, we just want to manage the car, manage the grip, manage our commitment and our comfort level. Don't do anything stupid. Don't try to be a hero here. It doesn't really save you a whole bunch because we're about to go into a big braking event. Here is one of those areas where the blue paint is actually, there's no interpretation here. It's a pretty soft radius, straightforward corner. Something that I like to do that somehow, somewhere, people started teaching to go all the way out to the runoff and start straddling the white track limit line or getting on the right side of the track limit line. And I really, really, really do not like that, because it makes your entry to 16, which is very, very fast, really shallow. And that's a scary place to have a lot of wheel in the car. So I like to hold my hands a little bit further on the uphill of here, get my braking done while I'm pointed straight, and it really softens the amount of wheel I have to put into it to make it into turn 16. You'll see here. I never get anywhere near straddling that white line, right? My apex, or the place I'm looking to crest the hill, is this, right where the grass meets the asphalt. There's a big pit down there right in front of station 15. But you can see we're settling the car. Look at how much speed we're still rolling through. If you're all the way over here, you've got to scrub down to almost 10 more miles an hour just to get the car to turn, and then you're cresting the hill with a lot of speed and a lot of wheel in the car. That's a bad recipe, man. So we want to open our entry there, and it's really simple. We're not doing anything crazy. We're not sacrificing any speed. We're just holding our hands left up the hill of 15 just a split second longer, just to open up our entry and to straighten out our braking. And so that's turn 15 through turn 16. This is about where we're going to pick up next week. I'm going to go back to turn 6, and I'm going to shut up and just kind of let the video play so everybody can kind of see, and then we'll answer some questions. Turn 6 should be about right here. Oh, nope. There we are. All right, here we go. So that's that. If anybody has any kind of questions or wants to answer any questions once this goes into recording, once we hit finish on here, it'll get saved to our Facebook page, and then later on, Taylor will be uploading it to our YouTube. But we'll kind of leave it open for a couple of seconds for questions if anybody has any.
Also, be on the lookout. We're going to do a quick survey to see what time works best for everyone for us to go live. We've gotten a few different feedback from those that are in Eastern time zone or those that are still working a regular schedule. So be on the lookout for that and give us your feedback on what time works best. I know Jimmy Gott said, "Great job, Matt."
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy.
And then Brian Preston, I heard the blue paint was for America. Everything we do. Red, white, and blue. Let's see. Awesome series, Matt. Thanks for the tips.
Yeah, thank you guys. We're going to call it then. If nobody has any questions, like I said, you can always email me, matt@motorsportspark.org, or message me on Facebook. I'm always fine to answer anybody's questions whenever. We'll see you next week. We're going to finish the lap out, go through the 17-18 complex, which is for me the scariest piece on the racetrack. Sinkhole, and then the S's onto the front straight. Thank you guys for watching, and we hope it helps.